Would you all please rise and join me for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, everybody. Tonight is February 21st, 2019. We've been going strong. I want to thank those members of council and our dedicated staff from Town Hall, Finance, and I'll include you too, Mr. Kellogg, in that for enduring this long day. So this is our first budget workshop session for council review, and I've kind of apprised the members of council individually as to what my expectations are for this initial meeting, this kickoff meeting. I want to reserve it really to identifying which department heads we want to attend our two scheduled upcoming meetings, so we can get those department heads, let Mr. Kellogg decide what's most convenient for them and when they can come and present, should it be necessary. And then secondarily, if there are any general or overreaching comments and or questions that you may have relative to any of the departments specifically, and we'll go through them. Let's just get it on the record now. Let us know. I have no issues with Mr. Kellogg answering any of those questions if he can handle it this evening, or if finance can handle it this evening. But really the thought is if we need more information or we have any specific questions, let's get the information out there. Let's let everybody have the opportunity to respond, even maybe some of the department head issue questions where otherwise we would think the department head has to come to the meeting. Maybe those questions can be answered by Mr. Kellogg or staff, and then we don't have to waste their precious time coming here before us for questions that otherwise we wouldn't need to hear from there directly. Once we have that together this evening, then unless there are any other comments, I really don't want to drill down into the budget tonight. I think we should have all the information that we can assemble first, and then we'll go through, we'll hear from the department heads. I have no issues, so everybody knows, if, for instance, the next meeting, we hear from 3 department heads or 4 department heads or no department heads, whatever it may be, but then we'll start drilling down specifically, and if we have those departments that evening present, we'll go through those departments, and we can do that. I have no problem with that. So I really, I mean, this is a well-prepared budget. I really don't think we're going to need all the time we've allocated, but it's there, and in the event we need more information or something happens with the state that affects the budget, we'll have that time. So with that said, I'll just open up the floor for any general comments. Mr. Kellogg, do you want to say something?
Can I just want to make one point of note for the record, just so that, just in the full spirit of transparency. So the budget document that I had sent out electronically the night of February 8th had a couple of items on there that were identified subsequent to that were corrected in the books that you have in front of you and were corrected for the public. One is simply a header on pages 14 and 15. The second column header incorrectly stated approved at referendum 1920. Clearly that was a copy paste from the prior year and that was fixed.
I'm not sure those were corrected in the books.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That may not
they
be
were corrected online.
They corrected online. All right. So that
would print out new pages. The numbers are fine.
Yes.
Where is it online? Wrong.
What's that?
Where is it online?
If you go, you can go
On
through
the
the link right on the
important links,
No, there's a.
bottom right, important links.
I'll find it.
Okay.
Thank you then.
You can, I also just posted it yesterday on Facebook, direct link to the budget.
JasonMauer.com, Facebook. Budget.
So that column clearly should be, it's for Selectmen's proposed budget, 1920. Again, that was just a clerical thing with a copy paste. And then the second thing was just to let you know that on page 37 of the document, that's one of the summary level where the departments roll up, and there is a single line for social services salaries part-time. The budget document itself is a very complex document that pulls in multiple links from other source documents. There was a change made at the department level, which did not, and the link on the summary roll-up did not link for just that one page. So that line was corrected in your books and online. It had absolutely nothing to do with any of the other numbers, the totals. It was correct in the department detail. It just didn't flow up to the summary line, and the link was, we found after the fact the link was broken. So again, it doesn't affect anything from an overall numbers perspective, but I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. The only version that had that was the one that was emailed out that night. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kellogg. Anything else preliminarily before we go through it, Mr. Mauer?
Thank you, Chairman Lito. Just one thing as I was going through this that, obviously for this budget we won't have, but I thought could be helpful in the future, is the addition of 2 columns of the information. One being the year-to-date for the prior budget years, so that we can compare what our current year-to-date is to what that year-to-date was 1 year ago. I found that when I went back and I looked at some of the things from last budget and compared things, but there's a lot of areas where most of the money is spent in the spring, and to know approximately where we were in December of 2017 versus where we are now for this past December 2018, compared to then what it ended up being in 2017 to what we projected to end up being for this year and budgeted. I think that column could be very helpful, as well as in the same year the budgeted amount. We have what the actual amount spent was, but what the budgeted amount for that year. So for this year it would be the budgeted 2017, the year-to-date 2017, the actual 2017, and then the rest exactly the same. I just find that having that information, and again, I went back and looked at last year's budget proposal and was able to get a lot of those numbers where I had the question, but it would be very helpful to have those in the chart in the future to make comparisons a little bit easier.
Sounds good. We need a magnifying glass to be
That's
handed
the
out.
same.
It's gonna be really small little homes.
Appreciate the suggestions. Anybody else, just quickly? Okay. So let's go through, we'll do our warm-up exercise and get our pages nice and ready to go. So we'll go through the departments one by one. And again, any general questions, request for more information, or a request that the department head present. And again, don't think that, I guess my theory is gonna be if one of us wants a department head to present, then we'll have that department head present, but please don't be nervous or think that you're gonna be called out and identified as the one person that wanted someone. If you have a question generally that needs explanation, then I think probably we may all be thinking the same thing, or if we're not, it probably will be helpful to us. So, yes, Mr. Root, sorry.
Just keeping with that, are you looking for also some validity or validation, justification as to why? You appreciate that?
I would appreciate that. I'm not gonna demand it, but I don't anticipate having any interrogations this evening, but, all right, so let's, town council, we'll start there.
They should show up.
Town council's gonna show up. Okay, so, I'm sorry, office of the first selectman was the first one. He's here, council's here. Board of Finance, we have an opportunity to speak to, but again, this is the Board of Finance budget, so stop me if I'm just gonna go through the ones that are obvious. Registrar, I'm sorry. I'm just going tab by tab. So I'm on tab 8. So tab 8, registrar. Some minor adjustments to salary increase request. Anybody on registrar? No, okay. Tab 9, Ms. Martin, is the office of the town clerk. Anybody?
Officer,
No?
No.
If I'm going too fast, just slow me down, okay?
move it.
11, we have the treasurer. Obvious.
One quick question, I don't think I,
I think you skipped
You missed
that.
10.
Tax
yeah, tax collector.
Ms. Martin, you set me up. You see that?
Of course.
Started calling the wrong tabs out. All right. Tax collector.
One quick question,
Yes.
both tax collector and treasurer. I believe the answer is yes. The salaries that we see in there were the totals of what we just increased to. That's not an increase from the increase, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Treasurer, nobody. Boards and commissions. All right, now into the meat of the budget. So we have the community and social services budget.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Mauer?
The senior center, there's, community social services comes up a couple of times, and I think there's not just the senior center, but we're on the senior center now. I have some questions about the programming budget on that as to exactly which numbers deal with the programming allowance and where those figures came from.
Okay.
But then also, again, later on, when it comes to the other parts of the social services, I think there's a few line items that can be
Okay.
discussed.
I actually tend to agree with you. I think it's a department head that we are used to hearing from, and it's
Right.
fairly complex, so I'm okay with that. Mr.
Me
Reed?
too.
Maybe not for this example, because I think those are good points, but tonight, could we clarify whether or not, after someone requests a department head, could we explore whether the first selectman is appropriate for answering? that
Absolutely.
question?
Absolutely.
Not that one, that's not
Right.
appropriate, but.
All right, so we agree that we'll have Ms. Lakioma
Yep.
present. All
Good
right.
opportunity for it too.
She's new too, I
Yeah.
didn't get to hear from
So good. We have
Mr.
to-
Chairman?
Yes.
Can I go back to boards and commissions?
Sure.
Quickly, which is
You
number
must,
12?
yes.
Mr. Kellogg, if, planning and zoning, is there a reason why they went up to 5,000? When in 17-18, they were at 3,200, and this year they've only spent 683 out of their, not went up to, stayed at, sorry. They've only spent 683 out of their 5,000 budgeted. We don't think that can be lower by
So I
1,000?
believe, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Brodowski to refresh my memory, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe that is being driven by legal notices. And the issue was in 17-18, they were actually running over budget and temporarily utilized funds from user fees, application fees to cover those costs.
Okay,
The current year, we believe some of the actuals were, is that the one we had to go back and possibly reclass some expenses, Ron, for the current year?
I think this one is related to the,
Or is this one related, is this related to the clerk?
this is related to the clerk and how some of it's being.
So,
covered
yeah,
by
okay,
law.
I'm sorry, you're right, you're
now.
right. So this is, I'm sorry, you're correct. So, so this situation is where they were down the clerk taking their minutes, and we actually had a staff member basically filling in to do that while they did not have someone. So basically, those costs are not reflecting, yeah, they're not normal. They're abnormally low because we have someone covering it as part of their job duties as opposed to hiring a secretary, which they have subsequently done.
okay.
Okay. Anything further, Ms. Aguilar?
Yes, good.
Good, okay.
Thank you.
EDC? No, Mr. Mauer?
Yep. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, no?
I
No?
would actually, sorry.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
no,
do.
no, I was pointing to you.
Yeah.
Anybody speak, go ahead.
Somebody's.
Somebody, anybody.
I would actually, if you can answer this, Mr. Kellogg, their budget being, even though it's lower than last year, are they going to, because it's so much higher than it has been in the past, the last couple of years, what do they intend on spending their money on?
So
Again this
the-
year.
I mean, it's somewhat articulated in the
I
details,
mean,
but
before we, I don't want to get into too much detail. I mean,
Okay.
do you, is it safe to say that you can answer any of those questions on behalf of
During
EDC?
the,
During
yeah.
our,
I
Yeah,
can
that'd be
certainly, I can answer that. I can also certainly bring the chairman of the EDC to the meeting, because this was reviewed by that commission, and they are in concurrence with the plan and feel very comfortable with the spending level as it is.
okay,
I think to answer your question, what we're looking to do, some of the things we're looking to do are to continue something that we think are more impactful, such as the commercial brokers, bus tours, creating, marketing material, in other words, collateral that can be distributed, real marketing stuff as opposed to some of the other expenses in the prior year's budget that we just think are not something that they're gonna pursue and would not have the return on investment.
Okay.
So why don't we do this, Ms. Aguilar, why don't we, we'll attack EDC next meeting, and if you have questions that you don't think Mr. Kellogg can answer, then we can reserve the next meeting so he can bring a member of that commission in.
Sounds good.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you.
HR, I think it's important that we hear from Ms. Lombardi on an annual basis, so I would ask that she present. Finance, they're generally captive, so that's an easy one. IT,
Yep.
anybody? Yes, you want to hear from them? Okay.
Is that a yes?
Definitely, yes, I think we
IT,
definitely should.
okay, so Mr. Corse. Assessor? Okay,
Those are no?
yes, Nara?
I do have one question on the assessor, but I have a feeling Selectmen might be able to answer. It's regarding the office expense numbers. Do you feel confident that you could probably answer questions on that limited?
Yeah,
Okay.
I might be able to, is this, so let me just say something, a broad statement, just because it might answer office expense throughout the board, so.
It's not to do with the toner.
Oh, then never mind. But I'll say it anyway. So historically, the cost for toner were carried in the IT budget. They've been steadily increasing over time, and I want accountability in the departments for those expenses, so we've taken it out of IT and pushed it to departments. So you'll see that as a variance throughout.
Okay.
So, but if you want to throw another office expense at me, I can.
Go ahead.
Well, it's just looking at the numbers here. 17-18 was 4,600. We budgeted 13,000, only less than 2,000 of which have been utilized. Even with adding the 1,100 of for Turner, the 12,000 seems a bit high compared to what we've done through the years.
I can get some more information, we can have him discuss, but I know some of the stuff that he does is seasonal by nature as well, so that may play into it.
So that's actually a good answer for without having the department head come in.
And I can say there's a lot of departments where in the same exact line item, I'm going to be bringing that up, but I felt like chances are we don't need to bring the department heads in for that if we can just get information.
Okay, good, that's a good example, thank you. Anybody else there? No? Okay, engineering?
Well, so engineering, planning, all of them are kind of the same crew?
Right, well, generally, it's been bifurcated now somewhat,
Yeah.
but in the past, we'd have Mr. Schatzline present as land use.
I'm
So-
conscious I might be one, but Rick being here new, I think it would be good to hear from him on his plans.
I actually agree with you, I don't think it's a bad idea to have.
Rick is anticipating you'll want to speak with him.
Right, so I think we should hear from him since he had a lot to do with the blessing of the reorganization there, so I think hearing from him would be a good thing.
I agree.
Did a really good job.
Okay. Inland wetlands, I think, can we start with Rick, and if we have to go beyond that, and Mr. Kellogg, then we can expand, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Building,
I think it's the same.
generally, right? Planning, zoning, I think we've covered all that. Town hall maintenance would fall within public works. I do think it's important that we hear from Mr. Nowacki. So we'll have him present. Yes, sure, Mr. Mauer?
If we can, just go back for 1 second. Again, planning zoning was another one, Mr. Selectman, where again, that same office expense line, similar numbers, just looking at, is that actually what needs to be budgeted based off of past year's budgets?
Okay.
Oh, okay, so that's the line, that's the line that has to do with the legal notice.
Okay.
That's up.
Why don't we just leave that question out there so you can look at specifically those office expenses and anticipate questions from Mr. Mauer? How's that sound?
It's fine.
Perfect.
There we go. Standing request. Special programs? Police Department,
Yes.
Yes.
okay? Chief Salvatore. The fire departments.
Yes,
All of them?
not necessarily. No, maybe.
Just emergency services in general, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if we hear from one, we should probably hear from all of them.
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I have questions on all three, so.
Okay,
I'm sure
so,
there's one person who'd be willing to speak.
yeah, I think you're right.
What gives you that
Yeah.
impression?
Excuse.
All right, fire, it is fire marshal, anybody?
Uh, Fire Marshal, Mr. Selectman, I have that same line item question. I guess it's not the same, it's, there's office expense, operating expense, and equipment that all have the same, kind of variation, where our budgeted amounts seem to be much more than we actually spend on any year's given basis.
Okay. Emergency management, I would think not. Public works, we've already addressed. Health department. Seems lean. Library,
There was no for health?
no for health. Library,
Yes,
yes?
yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I think social services behind health, but I think you were gonna have.
We covered it, same person.
Yep.
All right, so that's everything. So what I have is,
I think,
Parks and Rec was
Parks
oh, I'm
and Rec.
sorry.
right after library.
Yeah, skip that.
Same tab.
Parks and Rec,
Yeah.
it's a new department head, so I don't know.
Yep.
Yes,
If we go by the same rationale.
the gauntlet, is that what it's called? Oh, sorry.
At your house. maybe.
All right, so we didn't cut down too much. That was, all right, so I have,
Can I just, I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
Yes.
I didn't catch emergency medical services.
no,
Did we hit
I
that?
didn't
I
hear it. Yes?
actually,
Yeah.
yes.
EMS,
Yes.
yes, okay.
Okay.
So, social services, HR, IT,
Mhm.
can't even read my writing, which is pathetic.
Rick Schultz,
Yes, that's what it says, Rick Schultz, thank you. Chris
Chris
Nowacki,
Nowacki, Chief Salvatore.
Salvatore, the fire
all three
department,
fire chiefs,
yep,
but not the fire marshal.
not the fire marshal.
Yeah.
Do you, didn't you want?
EMS.
We don't need a marshal, do we?
No, neither one of the 25 initial.
I have some general questions on fire marshal, but
Parks and
again,
Rec.
it's the same kind of.
EMS, and,
Library,
what else?
library.
Library.
Okay,
What library was it, yes?
library was yes.
That's a lot, actually. That's a lot more than I anticipated.
Might as well have them all.
We better have some really good questions for our department heads. We're dragging them over. All right. Anything else?
I mean, we could not bring in the department heads and just make the changes.
That just flies in the face of what my opening comments were.
Are there any other department head questions that perhaps the first selectman could answer?
Well, that's my next question. I mean, it seems like, the question was, are there any, the statement was, are there any questions that anybody has regarding the department heads or departments that the first selectman may be able to answer in lieu of having the department heads come in?
Does not.
Anybody? HR, no, IT. Okay. Good, you have the list? So I'll just leave it to you to, I'll leave it to you to figure out the scheduling. No, HR, yes, IT, yes, we went through it. Their statement was, are there any questions specifically that would,
Yeah, got it, sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I would just ask that in that first meeting, that we also discuss public works, as there are some questions that if, we can't answer them on our own, I might want to call them in on that second meeting, similar to what we were discussing with EDC.
well, we have Mr. Nowacki coming in anyway, so.
Okay, perfect.
So, can ask him specifically. Okay, anything further? So I think we have our structure. If anything comes up, I always just keep this, if anything comes up along the way, you should feel free to reach out to Mr. Kellogg. I'm sure he can get you any answers in advance, and if it changes any of the requests, just let me know, or let him know along the way, all right? All right, I look forward to working through this budget, and I thank you all for your time this evening, and
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Heidi
see you
and
soon.
Ron.
Thank you.